As chair of the Holley Island Suburban Improvement District Board of Commissioners, I'd like to call this work session to order. Informal today. This is just our goal for this is to review all of the topics that we will be taking action on at next Monday's meeting. So let's start with the review of Chapter 3 of HICID personnel policies. Mr. Presley, if you want to lead the discussion, please.
Yes, and if you need to, it's up here on the screen if there's certain sections that you need us to go to and look at. But as we had discussed at the previous meeting, there is a trend both in the private sector and the public sector to transition to paid time off rather than differentiating different types of time off, vacation, sick leave, and whatever. So that's what we've done here is combined that time into paid time off. And in this Chapter 3, which is employee benefits of our personnel policies, there were no other changes. We didn't add to the amount of time, we didn't add to the amount of maximum accruals, and we didn't add to the maximum payout when an employee leaves. We've just rolled it all together. And can you scroll down just a little bit, Cheryl, to the chart there? Now, right there. That little chart there shows you the years of service, the amount of time that's provided, and how it's accrued. And in our payroll system, we can set this up for each employee and it will automatically do those accruals for us and track that. So, and there's one other change in the policy. We did add Martin Luther King as one of the observed holidays.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, President's Day, was that an additional day that was added for the employees, or was that you hadn't had it before, right? President's Day?
No, that's been in there.
Oh, I think we've been observing President's Day.
Okay. But Martin Luther
Well, of
King
course,
was,
I haven't been here, but
Yeah.
it has been observed in the past, yes.
it was MLK Day then. That was an additional day that wasn't before. So that's, everybody got an additional holiday. Is that right?
They will.
Okay.
They will in the future.
We did not observe MLK Day this year.
But next year it will be.
If
And
you
that-
approve this policy, yes, sir.
That adds a holiday to everybody.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that right?
Correct. So,
And isn't that in line with Carroll County government and other communities?
And
Yeah.
it's what I'm accustomed to in local government
Yeah.
in Texas.
Yeah, I agree, we should have been doing it all the time. In fact, we had meetings on that day, and when I was chair, I had a complaint from a couple of citizens about why we don't take it off like other groups do. But so we've added a day, as far as paid time off, that next Martin Luther King Day will be a day for everybody that the BOC is giving as an extra day off, right? Am I saying that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
correct. But
So-
the paid time off, Ken, you were probably like me. You'd have people that would come and they'd need to take their mother to the doctor, and they didn't have any personal leave.
Yeah.
So, but they had plenty of sick leave. What it did, in my case, it forced people to lie.
Yeah.
And this way, you just basically are getting a bucket of paid time off.
Okay.
The same that they've always gotten. There's been no increase. It's just that, they take it when they need it, after consultation with their supervisor and approval with their supervisor. It's just an easier way to administer it.
I like it, and the other question I would have is, does one person handle the paid time off for every employee? Does one person here in the building, do they watch your time off and the road crew and everybody? There's one person that does that?
Yes, sir, and that's Carrie.
Okay. So supervisor, John Doe's out and he's on the water department, then does a form that's filled out that he took a PTO day and it goes into Carrie?
Yes,
And
sir.
that's 1 day less for the John Doe.
And yes, she keys it in.
Do we have a written personnel policy?
That's what this is.
That's what those are.
We do, this
You
is
were-
just one chapter of
That's a
it.
chapter of it.
Yeah.
Whenever I first got appointed to the board, I requested a list of the personnel of the Holiday Island Suburban Improvement District and a job description of what they do. And I haven't got it yet.
I was not aware of that, Mr. Stamps, but I'll certainly get it to you.
But I think we need a copy of the personnel policy as well.
That's a good point, I think, that Larry brings up, because before we had one, the last time I was on the board, we had one, but it was real difficult to keep it up. In other words, if we changed this today, then we had to bring our black books in and put the new policy in and get copies from the staff and so forth. But we used to, and I turned mine in when I ended my 3-year term, but we used to we had our own black book of policies back then.
Fortunately, we're beyond that at this point. It's all online, on the website. It's under Muni Code. I also remember those big black books that every time there was a change, you were supposed to go in and update them, and they were never updated, and they were never done. So this way, it can be updated online and available to everyone.
Okay, but what he was asking just now is not in a policy book about the job description of every person in Holiday Island, is it?
That's correct. And those job descriptions, if they exist, I know for a fact they're not in this personnel manual.
Should they be? What might be a good idea?
No, sir. I don't believe so. I mean, and I've done a lot of, policy writing over the years, and we've never put job descriptions into an employee handbook or personnel policy manual.
Are you,
Thank you.
Mr. Stamps, are you looking for the job description or the job title?
I think there needs to be both. Unlike Danny and all the places I've ever been, whenever you hired somebody, they had a specific job that they were going to be doing.
That was for hire.
And so therefore, it was lined out, if you hire an accountant, his duty is to take care of all the accounting of the HICID and to furnish timely financial statements and all this kind of stuff. And you do that, that's his job. That's his job title. That's what he's supposed to do. It's not patch the roads and the potholes in the street. It's to do the accounting. And a person that, if he works for the road system, his job is to patch the potholes in the street. And a policy on how to do it. And we had all those things. And that's what I'm looking for.
Make one point is that Danny is in charge of the hiring. And if he wants to share job descriptions with us, that's okay. And obviously, if you post a job, you're going to send out a job description. And so I don't care about him. I don't feel a need to see a job description when he's got a job to do that he's doing well and managing.
Well, I do.
Okay.
Other questions? When you have an opportunity, would you see that Mr. Stamps gets the job descriptions? Is anyone else interested in them?
And I'm happy to do that, Mr. Stamps, with just one caveat. I am not certain that those exist. I've never seen them in my time here. I mean, if I hire someone to work in the road department, and I know what they do, I don't know that that's in writing somewhere, but I will certainly do some research and find out and get you what we have.
Well, and the other thing you run into also in a small organization like this is that different departments, everybody works together. Thank God they work together. You had some of the golf maintenance crew plowing streets during the last storm. So, there's that little line at the bottom, all other duties as assigned, that can end up being a lot of things.
We have that little line on
That's
every-
very true, but whenever you sit down and, I know when I was here, we had people that operated road brakes. We had people that operated backhoes. And all of those categories. Then we had people that didn't do any of those things. They were just extra hands, they patched potholes and did this and did that, or whatever. But you put those in there so that if you hire Jimmy Johnson to come out here and run a road grader or to operate a backhoe, that's a different category than what Joe Blow down here is doing, patching a pothole. And so
we do
therefore,
have equipment operators and laborers.
Right.
That's different.
it's different, and different pay scales, different categories, and all this kind of
But
stuff. And
on a
that's-
given day, that equipment operator may be called upon to help clean out the pool, or plow snow, or mow.
Most definitely. But he doesn't grade roads all the time, or he doesn't run the backhoe 100% of the time. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Barbara.
Name.
Do I have to do the name?
No, this is more of an informal
Oh,
session.
okay.
I am accustomed, and I'm old, I realize that, proud of it, but I have been accustomed my entire working career, because I've worked in a professional side of it, that you have a minimum standard of whether it's you have to have a degree, whether you have to have specific minimum skills to apply for certain jobs. For instance, in my industry with the level that I practice, if you did not have a college degree, you could never, for certain portfolios, you could never qualify to be a property manager at these particular portfolios. It didn't matter if you were very good, and usually the assistants are the ones that they don't have a manager's degree, and they're very good assistants. But it's a different level of pay scale. And I'm a little bit puzzled if we don't have just minimum degrees. And yes, I have done things, mop floors and clean bathrooms and the whole 9 yards. That wasn't in my job description, but if it was required to be done at the time, that is what you do. But to establish those level of pay skills, I'm just curious if we don't have minimum standards. I know that there are certain positions that you advertise for, and I would expect that those minimum standards be a part of policy. Otherwise, you don't wake up every day and say, well, today the job description for this is going to require this. I don't need to know what the job description is. Danny knows, but I would think that it does exist if for no other reason. I would think if I'm out there hiring, I'm looking for people that have a minimum number of qualifications. And I may like Joe over here better than Al, but Joe has a degree which is required to, whether it's operating machinery or whatever it is. And if they don't meet those standards, you can have a program in there that says, we'll send you to school to get that standard with the condition of your hiring. But I was just curious as to.
I think what you're talking about is what, in my world, would have been called administrative procedures. You have policies that the board established that you wanted a fair and equitable salary administration plan.
Yeah.
And then it was up to the administrator to develop the procedures that made that in effect.
Yeah.
And I think we have those. We have salary guidelines for employees.
Are those published though? What I was
We don't need
hearing
to be.
was that they weren't published.
I doubt they are. They never were where I've seen, you know. Sir, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
That's quite all right, Rick Chambers.
Hi,
I'm
Rick.
sorry. Every job I've ever had in my life, I had responsibilities and a job description. Otherwise, I would not have known what was expected of me. And otherwise, my supervision would have never known what I was supposed to be doing and how I would be held accountable for that. It's beyond me to understand how we can bring in people off the street and not provide them the same opportunity. Now, do I need to personally know that? No. but something needs to be set in stone and established. I work for the state highway department. I have responsibilities and a job description that I abide by, and that I'm evaluated on every year. So, you know, I don't know how in the world we can get by without it. And let me also ask, I do understand that it is necessary with a smaller volume of workforce to move people around and to go to other areas. Is there a provision in our system here that tracks their time and keeps up with their time so that it is charged to those departments specifically to get a clear picture of what those department costs are at the end of the year? That would be just a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to make another comment. In your position, you received your instruction from your manager
Every morning. Yes,
every
ma'am.
morning.
Yes, ma'am.
And creating a policy creates an exception to the policy comes along, then you have to change the policy. Joe Blow walks in off the street and is a genius, but he doesn't have a degree. But you still want him on your workforce. When you, making those things into a policy creates issues that I'm not sure we really want to have to deal with.
The policy itself, ma'am, doesn't address every specific task. And each morning when I'm given a job assignment, it is well within the task that is of my requirement for my job to fulfill.
Exactly. But
And the bosses know that whenever they issue that task. But as a new employee coming off the street, without a job description, then I would have absolutely no idea what I'm accountable for.
okay, I think we're confusing policy with hiring practices. And our hiring practice, if we need an operator for the road department, you're going to go to whatever publication, website you use and supply a job description. Minimum requirements, certification, and operating bulldozer.
Right.
Hours, 8 to 5. And that's administration as opposed to policy. And I'm not sure that the policy is all that important. I mean, it's important to have and for him to know.
I can't disagree with the policy aspect of it, but it was my understanding that the comment was that we did not have a job description.
I don't think
And
anybody
if I
said that.
misunderstood that, I must apologize.
That's not the way I took it.
I think, you know, if the desire is to have a book of job descriptions, they're readily available from the municipal league. All we have to do is adopt them and move on. But the fact remains, when we have a road department that consists of 3 people, it's a little difficult to pin each one of them down to specific tasks. And, you know, I in my previous life, I worked for the world's largest farm equipment manufacturer. And I worked in labor relations for 6 years. And it was very frustrating when you had a pipe fitter whose job didn't include opening and closing valves. So he would stand and watch the water flow, waiting for the right person to show up to turn the valve.
I've worked in union environments as well.
You understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly.
30 years in the carpenters union. And we're not talking about a union position here.
No,
We're talking about jobs that have been
Yeah.
here for 50 years. There's never been an issue, and now all of a sudden it's an issue.
It's not.
Why are we even going through all
I have
this?
no idea.
Crying out loud, everything seems to work fine to me.
We're talking about paid time off.
Yeah, paid time off, that's a whole different issue than job description.
I agree with you,
Let me
Randy.
reassure you, I ran this place for 15 years.
What do you mean
And
you ran it?
I was the general manager for Holiday Island for 15
Okay,
years.
so what?
And we had job descriptions.
Where are they?
I don't know.
Well, you said you ran it, didn't you preserve them?
I don't even
You
know.
I'm
know
sure
what the
that
job
they were.
description is.
Okay, all right.
All right,
Folks need a job description.
let's go back to the general thing we were talking about. Do any members of the board have any more questions about the minor changes that we're making to the personnel policy? We're just putting the sick leave, the personal leave, all in one bucket.
Can I ask one question on that? I'm reading it very quickly. Is there anything in there that states what employee this is? It's got to be a full-time employee, so there should be a limit as to where are your hours? Because if,
I think it's all laid out in the policy.
is there somewhere there
Yes.
that says only a full-time employee is entitled to this?
It's whoever accrues time off, which is probably just a full-time employee.
Yeah, I mean, that,
Yes.
you know, but as a part-timer, there are times when I work an hourly week or something that would attribute to a full-time, but I don't want to be full-time. But I just want to get that straight, because sometimes that'll come up. Well, I worked, I'm here 10 years, okay, why not, so
Yeah.
make sure there's something in there that says that. So
Yeah.
there-
And that's the good thing about having these procedures in place. When you run across those little glitches like that, where you need to make corrections, it's an administrative procedure and they can make
Right.
corrections.
Madam Chair, I want to ask, is there anywhere in here, I can't see that well, I've read it before, but let's say that John Doe and Rhodes uses his 10 days of PTO and then he's very ill. Can he borrow? Do we have any system for giving him hours for next year? Or can another employee loan him sick days? You know that happens in schools, right? So is there anything in there? What happens when John finishes his 10 days and it's February 22nd? What are
Our policy, and keep in mind, I didn't change the policy other than combining the time. The policy did not state anything about borrowing time from another employee.
I think that would be up to the district manager's discretion, since he's the
That has been,
ultimate personnel manager.
Well, we have short-term disability.
yes, and that has been done. It is a practice, but it's not written in the policy.
Okay. Any more comments?
Nope.
All right, let's move along to the structural engineer's report on the recreation center. And Danny, for the benefit of the people who, all of us have had this sent an email and looked at it, but for the benefit of the people that are sitting here, if you would kind of go over what he looked at and perhaps read verbatim what his conclusions were.
Sure. So at the request of the board, we did want to hire an independent engineer to come and assess this. So I found a reputable engineering firm out of Springfield. They don't normally travel this far, but they were willing to help us, and they sent an engineer out. So he did send us a report with his seal on it. There have been 2 different places where they've cut a big hole in the floor so he could gain access and see underneath there. And so he did gain that access, took some photographs, as you can see in the handout that we provided in his copies of his report. There were actually 3 main issues. The first issue was that the subfloor was not constructed correctly when it was built back in the early 70s. They used 2x6s for floor joists, which he says is very unusual. And even the stringers, I think, were 2x8s. It just wasn't built properly to begin with. The second thing was it didn't have proper ventilation under there, which caused moisture to accumulate under the building, and it accelerated the rot on those boards. And then the third thing was termite damage that he noted, extensive termite damage in places underneath the building. So his conclusion, and I won't read this whole thing, but he came to the same conclusion as the contractors that we had hired to come out here and assess the building previously. That he says if repairs are attempted, some method to dehumidify the crawl space would be needed to prevent a reoccurrence of the same problem. Additionally, even after repairs, the structure will still sit on a crawl space that's too shallow to allow reasonable access for maintenance. The building layout is less than ideal. This might be addressed in some small way during a renovation, but the same basic layout would likely need to be maintained in order, I think that he's got a typo there, in order to limit expenses. In our opinion, while the repair work could be done, it is likely to be impractical. The work will be very time-consuming, and the extent of the work will be difficult to gauge and impossible to bid up front without extensive demolition. Even once repairs are made, the basic structure will still be 50 years old. So his rationale is the same as mine and the contractors that I looked at. That's why the contractors wouldn't even give us a quote on trying to rehab the building, because the phrase they use is you would be chasing problems. You tear up the floor, you start rebuilding the substructure, the floor joist, and then you find plumbing and electrical and many other issues, and you're still dealing with a crawl space that's problematic. It's just inherently problematic. And my opinion, and this is, I understand it's a board decision, but I couldn't in good conscience spend our property owner's money to invest in that building. I just don't think makes good sense. So I know the board has looked at a set of plans that Broadway Construction brought. I have spoken to them since the last meeting. We could take that set of plans and massage it. We could scale it down and reduce the cost to some degree. And that's where we're at if the board wishes to move forward with that.
I actually asked to be there when the structural engineer was there, simply because I was not familiar with that building. I never had been any further than really the front office and Janice's office when I signed up to rent the pavilion once. So I really wanted to see what the building was like. And since the structural engineer was there and talking about what needed to be done, I said, you know, as a layperson, explain to me, if we wanted to keep this building, what would have to happen? And he said, you would have to gut the entire building. You'd have to pull up all of the floor joists. You'd have to rebuild the substructure. And he said, and you still have the same problems. You don't have enough ventilation under the building. He certainly gave the impression that he thought it would be throwing good money after bad. So that was my sense of the whole thing. But
Danny,
comments?
could you discuss a little bit, I know he commented about the deterioration of the concrete piers and the concrete foundation under the building.
Yes.
That was alarming to me. I mean, it's one thing to replace floor joists, but when
What he said was the pilasters are waning.
That
It
was
doesn't
the
say
word I
they're
was looking for.
deteriorated. And you're talking about maybe $150,000 to fix this building versus $750,000 for a new one. I don't see any justification of $750,000 for a new building, when this one could be repaired. And I don't believe his $50,000 to take up the floor and tear down drywall. And I spent 40 years in construction. And I also see that he's got a lot of opinions in this that only could have came from you about the layout. No structural engineer walks in and looks at a building and starts attacking the layout. It's all about the structural integrity of the building. Moving interior partitions is merely cosmetic. It's not a structural issue. And I think $750,000 for a new rec center is not something the people here want to spend money on. Just my opinion, but we could take a poll and see who wants to spend $750,000 for a new rec center.
I'm sure I talked to Mr. McLaughlin a few weeks ago. He had been in to talk to Danny, I think, and he said he was going to go over there and look at, he was going to call Janice and get the key and look at that structure to do basically what you just brought up. And that was to look, either cut new holes in the floor and look at more closely. I think the last time I talked to him, which was just 2 days ago, he said he could probably do it for half of the amount that Broadway had mentioned, but he said he would have to have cost plus at the end of the project. That's the way he does his homes. And he's built 9 homes here in the last 6 months in Holiday Island. My thought, and I agree with what you just said, and what Danny said about good money after bad, Suzanne, but I'm not sure that we need either the remodeled building to be as big as it is or a new building. And what I mean by that is basically there's 2 reasons to have that building. One is to check in golfers, play golf, and the other is to check in like tennis players. Well, tennis players usually come so we know who's out there, pickleball and so forth. And that happens in the lobby and swimming. The swimming is a big one for 5 months a year. But that's being done right now at the Island Room. That's being done very well. I like the Island Room, it's a nice facility. What would happen if we didn't even have the rec center? If we made a opening in the fence and made it more secure and so forth, so kids aren't jumping over and getting in there and drowning at night at 12 midnight. Do we really need, it's quaint. One comment the builder said was we'd leave the fireplace up. I don't need the fireplace. I got a fireplace at my home. I don't need to go to the rec center, sit in front of the fireplace and check out a book, which we have books and CDs to pick out there to check out. So I'm wondering, we had 700,000 big 2 buildings in our plans that we got. And I think they were good plans. I think the company did a good job of coming up with that. But it's way, way too much. We don't have nearly, I talked to you, Danny, we don't even have half the money to build for 700 grand. And should we go out to the bank, one of the banks, and get a loan for 300,000? I wouldn't vote for that, would not. We've got a tight budget here. We had a lot of good budget discussions in November and December, and we passed a $4.7 million budget. It didn't include about 10% of that budget to do this building. So I think we have to go back to the drawing board, if you will, the literal drawing board. And if we're going to have a new building, it's got to be within a cost structure that's reasonable. And what is the purpose of the building? That's what we have to ask. And if
Let's
it's the
ask
purpose of the
Janice.
building- Pardon?
Let's ask Janice.
Yeah, fine.
And I've talked to Danny about this and probably Ken when he stepped in. That building is too big. It's not necessary to be that big.
Okay.
You need to have, in my mind, I see a restroom and a couple of showers. If you want to put them inside again, that's fine. But if you're going to do remodel, you could put a shower on the outside, just a clear off shower. We don't need locker rooms. We're not a country club where people are going to come in and do all their workout. Now they got to put a suit and tie on to go to work. That's not necessary. The lockers there are people throwing in their noodles and putting locks on them. That's it. So if you can move lockers to the outside along the building, you have to have this whole thing covered in a walkway through the 2 pools so that you have the 2 pools connected. You have a small building in the front where you have an office for the director, once you get a director, and an area for the people to check in at.
Right.
And very minimal. We have to scale down. We don't need all that vegetation out front. We don't need any kind of heavy maintenance like what's there right now because we don't have the manpower to do it.
Right.
Now, if you could save where the showers and the restrooms are for the pools and the back of the place, which is all on a slab, okay? If you could save that and just remodel the bathrooms, put in better looking stuff than what's there, and Kim still has her workroom and the storage room that we have. I mean, maybe we can put shelves in there and make it look better for her too, because we have a lot of stuff just laying around. But you can take a whole section from where those showers and the restrooms are for the swimmers right now and cut out a whole big section here. Still keep it under roof if you want to keep a roof, then you'd have that covered patio effect. You'd have to move air conditioning units. I mean, it would have to all be redesigned, but the building itself doesn't have to be that big. And that's my thought on it. And take out the fence, that rock wall, make it all open, more conducive to swimmers and visitors that come and, that way the person sitting in that room there, or your office area or your thing has all the glass windows to see both pools. See, right now where we're at in the island room, it's working out really well because the golfers come in. But when the swimmers start coming, if this happens this summer, there's gonna be an issue with how they're gonna get to the pool. We have to cut a hole in that fence, give them a gate, and then we are not opening a small pool because we can't see it. So there's an issue with where your vision is. And at this point, even now, when somebody comes into golf, that person who's in there watching swimmers can't leave that building. You know, it's too far a distance than it was from the other way. So there'll be two people that will have to be there all the time. It's just, there's gonna be a lot of challenges this summer. Yes, that building can be made smaller, there's no question about it. Throw out the fireplace, that's a waste of heat going up that chimney, you know, as much as we need it. But, you know, those are things to think about. With a good architect, and you sit down and give them your ideas, you might come up with a plan that will not cost that much. I gotta tell you, the electric and the plumbing in that place is a disaster. So you know, if you take it on this section, I hope it works for that section, because we don't even know where half the electric goes to, or where the pipes are. And then the one breaks under the thing and floods it, and we don't know where it's coming from. And it's really a disaster to try to get it across. Now, you mentioned the termite, he said termite damage. No, we pay for termite inspection there. I don't recall any termite person going in that crawl space. In fact, I got the bill, you know, to send, and nobody's ever come in and asked us to go in the crawl space. So we've been paying for it, and now it says there's a $50,000, you know, thing if they find termites. Maybe we should call them.
It is, I will say this, it's old damage. It's not a current termite infestation.
All right.
It's from years and years ago.
Okay. So, but that's my opinion at this point on the.
Well, I think downsizing it makes a lot of sense, if you don't need the space.
No,
That is
we need like an office for the director, the open area for people to come in. You need a restroom for us in there, and maybe a break room, you know, where you could go in there and have a refrigerator and a little, you know, cabinet, because we have to eat too, we don't leave that place.
Yeah.
So just that area.
And storage.
And storage for, you know, some things that we need. We've accumulated a lot of plain crap in the place because everybody seems to just say, oh, here, have this, you know, here, this is, and we just piled stuff in there.
And a big dumpster.
And we get a big dumpster, exactly. And we have, you know, we were already talking, Kim and I mean, if this was the way to go, we could, hopefully we could take some of the stuff out of there, like a hot water tank that's out there for the inside, and they put it in the barn because you get new stuff, because it would be a new build. And, you know, move some of the stuff we can use at the barn over there. So, but yeah, it doesn't have to be that big. There's a lot of wasted space and just ugly damage.
So, where do we go from here?
I'm wondering, Madam Chair, and I'd like the people who are familiar with construction to answer this maybe. Instead of putting joists, 2x10s, 2x8s, 2x6s, or whatever's in there now, and cement, what do you call them, pilasters?
Pilasters,
Yeah. If that area were rebuilt and reconstructed instead of a new building, could you not put cement over the entire area? Put up on the screen or not? Could you?
That's kind of what I was thinking about, Ken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just-
Over top of the crawl space?
No,
No, where the
fill in
area
the
is,
crawl space with,
what we're looking at right
Fill.
here on the screen,
and then put a concrete slab.
Yeah.
just pour cement in the whole thing after you get your plumbing ready and that picture up there points out.
First off, you wouldn't fill it with concrete, you would just fill it all with sand or some other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fill materials for him, just put your 4-inch concrete
Yeah.
on top.
Yeah, that's doable, and I agree that maybe part of this building should be torn down and part of it restored.
Right.
What makes me angry is we don't have $750,000. Janice has verified, we don't need that big a building. It's hardly used. I think we ought to take the best part of the building, preserve that, tear the rest of it down, fill it in, do some landscaping and whatever Janice needs. But I think initially, if that's what in reality, even if we tried to restore that building, you're probably still talking a couple $100,000. As far as the age of the 50 years old, half the houses in here are over 50 years old, and I'll bet 90% of them are on crawl spaces. just because of the way the structure is here with stone, very close to the surface. The building could be restored, but if we can tear down half of it and put up, and restore it to where we can have a smaller building for 100,000, I'm all for that.
So, Danny,
Keep in mind, sir, there's been nothing but discussion. We are nowhere near any kind of a decision on this.
I understand that,
So,
because it's
I
been
mean-
about 6 months and nothing has happened.
Well, that could be, could very
Well,
well be.
when was it closed?
August?
August, yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah. But what's the rush? Why would we rush into this?
Why would we not?
Well, number one, we can't find anybody to work on it. So, I know, and keep the emotions down.
But I'm saying, it is something that all the homeowners are being charged for. We own that building, right, as homeowners?
Yeah.
And now it's in disrepair and it's sitting for 6 months, waiting for somebody to do something.
You're right, and hopefully do the right something. And that's why we're having this meeting here this morning, is to kind of get a feeling for direction and, you know, what people, what kind of ideas, brainstorm, you know, those kind of things.
I think the first thing that has to happen is we have to decide is how much money is available to do this.
I think
And once we know a budget, then we can decide what can be done within that budget.
I
Right
think-
now, we don't have a budget, we're just,
well, the district manager is well aware of how much money could potentially be available for this. Well aware of it, so, and has.
well,
been
and I was
for a
at
long
the
time.
other meetings, and I've heard that number. That we have in, some way we can take out an early CD or something, and we have some
No,
cash.
we're not gonna rob CDs.
But I think we need to move forward and make a decision on what we're gonna, or we're gonna be here a year from now, still doing the
I
same
agree with
thing.
that.
It's been 6 months already.
Yep.
I think we ought to either set a budget and say, as a board, this is much money we have to work with. What can we do for that? Can we take down part of it? Do we have to take it all down and put up a smaller building? But I think the first thing that has to happen, and it's no different than you or anybody else, they go to build something or do, you need a budget. And we've not talked about that at all.
Danny, Chair, Danny, you looked, when you were looking for the engineer and so forth, and you looked at other projects since you've been here, could we widen our net of contractors? And I know we've been to Springfield, that's where this fellow's from, Springfield, Missouri. But during the storm a few weeks ago, I talked to one of the fellows in the road and project, and he said he knows of a contractor out of Rogers that would build this building that we're talking about to store the chat and the salt and so forth for the price that we put it up for a year and a half ago. So, and also that there's another person over there, another company, fairly large company, that could do the work at the rec center. So I'm wondering if we even advertise in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, which goes all over the state, wanted, you know, a contractor to come in and remodel or build, I mean, whatever the ad would say, but I bet we'd get 3 or 4 good, competent, bonded contractors.
Well, first we decide on the budget. Second, we decide on size, how big a floor plan we need.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we make the decision, try to repair part or start from scratch. And then you put out an RFP. Do I have that about right?
Fine.
And advertising it is, you've talked to a number of contractors already who won't do anything except on an RFP basis.
But
Well, they
they're local.
Or they won't give us,
They won't attempt to rehab it because they can't give us a price because they have no idea what they're gonna get into, so they wouldn't.
And they have no scope of work. Because they could not have a scope of work until you had an engineering report. Now you have itemized exactly what the engineer said. It could all be wrote out in a scope of work and put out for bids.
right, that's what I'm saying.
Right now, it's go look at the building and everybody comes up with a different idea. Well, that's not the way it should be done.
I
You
don't-
have an engineering report, there should be a scope of work written, and that's how you solicit bids from contract. They're all bidding on the very same thing.
Exactly right, and that's what I was trying to say.
Right now, it's arbitrary
We give 'em a
what guys
budget,
are
we give
saying
'em
and what
a
they're trying to
plan.
bid on.
Of course, the
But
problem with
why don't we employ an architect to come in, get with people and say, okay, we don't need anything this big, we need something smaller, we need it to function like this, we need windows here, we need this here. Sit down with the architect and tell him what we can do. Have the architect draw up the plans for it.
We had that discussion a couple of weeks ago with Broadway, because I told them that the scope of and the size of what they had brought us initially was too much.
Way outside.
And we were going to have to scale it way back, just as Janice described, and I think Janice gave a very good description of what you actually need there. And Broadway said that would be the next step if we employed them, would be to sit down with an architect, me, the builder, an architect, Janice, and scale this thing down to something that is within our budget, which is going to be around 300 to 350,000, is about what we can cash fund if we do this project. Anything above that, we would probably be borrowing money, but we can cash fund 350,000 if that's what the board decides you want to. About half of what they initially proposed. But I believe you're right, Mr. Stamps. We would be looking to an architect to take in those ideas and draw something that they could bring to the board, and we could lay eyes on the plans,
Right. And then somebody can bid.
and then put it out for bid.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's on the assumption that we're taking the building down.
Not necessarily, no. I think what they're talking about is, what do we need? And if the portion that's on a slab could be rehabbed sufficiently, I don't think that anybody'd have a problem with that. We're not
I have a
And
question
slap
about
the rest
that.
of it.
We're not
What
locked down
is
to
on
a
the
new
slab?
the
Help me.
Restrooms,
The
showers,
restrooms
and showers.
and showers are already on a slab.
Yeah.
Correct.
And
And
so
the
the
work-
front
the
area
work room
where
at the
the
back.
check-in,
It goes, yeah, where the women and men's shower rooms are on a slab. You
Okay.
get back here to their, when you walk through the doorway and now you're onto their, where the lap locker rooms are, that's all on piers and
Okay,
wood.
so-
So that would go.
I have a
And then
picture.
you have slab again that goes into where we have a pump room, where the pumps are for the pool.
Mhm.
And then the back of the building has on slab also,
Okay.
where our, used to have a game room back there or something, but it just hit something and it turned into Kim's, that's our storage area. And then next to it is another little room where they put the noodles for the swimming pool and her tool room. So that area is on a slab.
so this picture is above, beneath the check-in.
There's
And
all
your
the
office.
second, my
This-
office goes all the way back, the kitchen area. So I've already kind of measured out, you stop it here and then you build this here and you open here and, yeah, there's kind of an idea in my head what would work, if it would work with an architect, I don't know. But it could be a much
Okay.
smaller building
I
and space
just-
in between the two pools. So they're not walking around the back of the building anymore to get the pools, you just go right through.
Yeah, I was just trying to visualize the current layout.
Yeah, everything but the bathrooms and the back there are on a crawl space.
Are over this.
Yeah, locker
Okay.
rooms are on the crawl
Okay.
space, that's where it's the most mushiest, the men's and women's
Yeah,
locker
yeah.
rooms.
And that's where the mold is?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, I would have to agree with this gentleman's opinion that I think if we put it to a straw ballot in the community, the likelihood of us getting support for a completely new structure would be a very risky proposition. And just my common sense knowledge of how much the facility gets used, I'm not sure there's any way we could ever justify a $700,000 expenditure for something that doesn't get used. It's not a revenue generator to the extent to make that kind of a capital investment. I would be very supportive of trying to rehab or remove that front part of the structure, remove it, and put a freestanding roof structure over with check-in windows and, that kind of thing. I have to say that until this morning, and looking at these pictures, I'm thinking, now, what would Bob do if I had that kind of problem at my house? Well, I'd look for a way to fill in that hole.
Exactly.
And with fill material, open up the front of the building so you can drive equipment in there, bring in fill material, put your plumbing, necessary plumbing or whatever in, and then pour a 4-inch concrete floor, and then redo your walls however you want them. I
No, so
think
you're
it's,
not talking about taking down the whole this building?
no, I think it's doable, but again, it's gonna be,
Well, I think it's.
I mean, Danny's faced this problem of trying to get somebody that is willing to do the work. And maybe if we have the scope of what we're, specific scope of what we're looking to have done, maybe that'll bring them together and get us some kind of,
But is the consensus that I hear is that at the next meeting, we ought to make a motion to hire an architect to develop the scope of work and then begin to try to bid this out?
well, can an
The
architect
architect
do the
won't
scope
make
of
the
work?
scope of work. He'll make us a drawing, and from that drawing, we make the scope of work. But I think we're getting somewhere that take off part of the bad part of the building and fill it in with concrete and fill and remodel the face of it, make the building smaller. It's a much less and much easier to do than start over from scratch. And you're right, I think the first thing we need to do is get an architect, have him sit down with Janice and say, listen, this is the space I need, this is what we have. Make us 3 drawings that show us an elevation that we can show the board and see if they like it. Because it's just changing a roof line and adding windows and doors, but I think that's a whole lot easier to do than what we've been thinking about.
Danny, is there do you know, has anyone checked in the walls and see if there's mold inside the walls in the sheetrock? Has anybody done that to any extent?
No, sir, they have not. And
There's
that's-
been some visual of some black mold on the
Yeah, I
surface.
see it in the air conditioning units back
Yeah.
in showrooms, but I don't
Yes.
see anywhere else. Is there
We
anywhere
know
else?
it exists in
Mold?
parts of the building, it's just.
Well,
that-
we've seen little light black stuff, but we just kind of blew it off. I mean, we're
Yeah.
probably all gonna get.
There's companies that do mold remediation.
The reason I ask that is you don't have to tear walls down if you want certain walls to stay there. If there's no mold inside the wall, and you don't have to tear that all out, you can leave that the way it is. Yeah. But I think, Danny, maybe you'd agree with me because you came from 2 very large cities, Houston and Texarkana. We need to expand our scope of builders and contractors. I think you talk to mainly the people here, our local home builders, and they're good people, don't get me wrong. But I think somebody with a bigger, like Broadway, if they want to do a $300,000 job instead of a $700,000, there are companies out there that would do that.
But the problem that you have, Northwest Arkansas is growing so quickly.
Yeah.
And the contractors and the tradespeople, the heat and air, the plumbers and this kind of stuff are taking up. There's an apartment complex in Rogers that's been sitting over there forever because they can't get the people in there. My older son is a contractor. He does subdivision. He does the infrastructure and subdivisions. He's got 6 projects going, from Siloam Springs to Bentonville to Fayetteville to Farmington. And I asked him about the water situation that we have here. And he said, Dad, I wouldn't even think about coming over there and giving a bid on it. Because he said, if I did anything like that, I'd have to pay per diem. And he said the cost would just be prohibitive.
That's, That's a very good point, Mr. Stamps, and all of the contractors that I spoke with told me that same thing. They're short on their laborers. We are in sort of a remote area. They have to bring people in from, what your population centers of Bentonville, Rogers, Springdale, or maybe over at Harrison. So it's a difficult build. And then you have all of the uncertainty. And what are they going to find when they start doing a portion of the demo? At what point does that demo stop? What are they going to find in the walls? What are they going to find underneath? As she mentioned, plumbing, electrical, it's a mess. And so there's so much uncertainty wrapped in this project that the contractors are scared of it. And that's kind of what has led us to this impasse here today. And then on top of that, what about the opinion of the property owners? Is this good money? Is this a wise decision? Is it not? So this is not easy. But I like your idea of starting with an architect and scaling it down so we know exactly.
So it fits on the slab we have.
We know what we need to spend, and I can narrow that in a little more if necessary, but we generally know what we have to spend on it to cash fund it. And then we're going to need to work with the architect, figure out what we need, and then as you said, send it out for RFPs.
And hope we get some.
Yes, and then as Mr. Brown said, Dr. Brown, we'll have to cast a wider net next time to get more contractors to.
I don't know, we've got a lot of local experts.
Yes, we do.
I know they're experts because they said so on social media. And they all have the answers to this problem and can fix it on a minimal budget. So let's call them all together. I'm being sarcastic, but Danny, I want to compliment you. Number one, you've done as best you could do to this point based on the direction you've gotten from this board. And so I appreciate what you've done, but I think the contractor that brought us that nice book, and they did a wonderful job of putting information together, but basically they were just trying to replicate what we have today.
Right.
We need to, as several of you have said, decide what we really need, and then do what you're proposing, get an architect to do some drawings, then we'll come up with a scope of work and hopefully fill in that hole.
And thank you for that, and I agree, we have to rethink the entire building.
Yeah.
Yes.
Its function, its purpose.
The purpose of the building, when it was built, was number one, it was the community center.
Right.
But when I came here, there were 16 families living on Holiday Island.
You weren't involved in the construction of that, were you?
No, it was already done when I got here.
You're distancing yourself.
Yeah, indeed. But that's what it was used for. And that, it was a grandiose place at that point in time. But it doesn't need to be that anymore.
No.
We got a clubhouse, we got other facilities that we don't have to have. And it was a sales tool.
Suzanne, I'd like one thing for next Monday, and I'd be willing to make that motion next Monday, because this is a workshop, and I can't make any motions. But once we have the amount of money that we could cash fund it, and we can make a motion to hire an architect and plan what we need, and then do an RFP to get the work done, try to attract more contractors. But one of the things I think Janice would agree with me is security, the fencing around that pool. For those of you who haven't been here for long, we had some kids get in from the condos across the street. 2 in the morning, Lawrence Blood and Janice get on their phone that there's kids in there. If they had died, if they had drowned, we are in a heap of trouble. Plus, I would never want that to happen. But we've got to have some, either larger fence, higher fence, spike fence, something. We need to take a look at that, especially on the side toward the island. Yeah, I don't think it'd be hugely expensive.
Make them
Only
part.
jump at one time.
Short of razor fence, I'm not sure you can deter
Yeah.
a well-intended teenager, right?
Well, then we need
They're
security
able to build
cameras.
tall buildings.
Then we need security cameras with a security company.
And
not
I would
automatic.
agree, yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Good.
And so would Janice, I think she's
I
shaking her
moved,
head.
I moved the security, well, the Blink cameras that we had at the rec center, because they still wouldn't work. It's run by the Wi-Fi. So we took them down from that building and put them around the island room. So now I get all the blinks that the deers are walking around. Good night, I hear blink, blink, blink. But yeah, the swimmers were, and the bad part about the swimmer, which was so, I thought to myself, if you fall, you're gonna impale yourself. Because you can see them on the camera. They come through the rock, right next to the front of the building, there's a rock wall. Anybody can get over that rock wall, now you're in the pool. But they didn't go and open the gate to the pool, which would have been a safer thing. They're jumping over the picket things, and they're standing on, I'm like, they're gonna impale themselves on that thing. Why don't you just open the gate? But they didn't, but they can't, yeah, it was quite a few times. They're stupid, but this was a woman.
Do you think there might have been alcohol involved?
It could have been, it was midnight. I mean, they came walking over, yeah, it was.
They were only 10 or 12.
And that's a little
Yeah,
pool.
the security cameras were
I got a
good.
couple.
Okay, so,
There was
we're
a
gonna see if Danny,
Skinny.
yeah.
Yeah. I stayed around a while.
So the code changes,
Well, I was gonna be sure.
basically it's just language, isn't it?
Yeah, the code regulations, nobody had a problem with changing that little bit of verbiage so that we moved the regular meeting
Right.
to Monday, the fourth Monday. So that shouldn't be a problem. We were gonna do a public tour of the marina, the road department, and the golf maintenance. And wanted to see if we could establish a time to do that, a time and a date. And Larry, you're the one person amongst us who works, so tell us when it would work best for you.
I'll make it work.
You'll make it work?
I'll make it work.
Okay.
So you don't have to fold it around my,
Well, what works best for you?
Afternoon, morning.
mornings, of course.
Mornings?
But I will make it work.
I think, the department heads need a little time when their people first show up in the mornings to
Yeah.
get them assigned to their work for the day. But by 9 o'clock, that should all be done, and we could
Start at 9.
start at 9 o'clock on whatever day you go.
Okay.
Just-
Part of it's dependent on the weather.
Yeah, and it is all weather dependent.
I'm gone Tuesday through Saturday of next week to Texas, so. I won't
Well,
be-
don't we need 2 weeks to post it?
I
Yeah.
don't,
2
We-
days.
2
We have to
days,
post,
I
we have
think.
to post it as a meeting,
Well,
All five.
next week is our regular board meeting, so maybe the following week we could do the tour.
Well, since most of us are free on a Monday morning, what about 9 o'clock on the 7th, which is a Monday?
I can make
Would
that.
that work?
Ken and I are probably busy.
9 o'clock on the, oh, you've been there, done that, huh?
No, I mean, we have a men's fellowship.
Oh, yeah.
That's
And we've
right.
got
Thank
the,
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Richard
Forecast is
from
for rain.
the state biologist is gonna be the speaker.
Yeah, we've got to be, thank you.
What about the next
How about
Monday?
the
Is he
14th?
gonna talk about the feral logs?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think I
Come on down.
might wanna go
Breakfast.
listen.
It's only $5 for breakfast.
Yeah. Good break.
What
So
about
then-
the 9th? That's a Wednesday in the
That-
morning.
That works. Yep.
9th? All right. So we're gonna set the public tour for March the 9th at 9 o'clock.
And what day of the week did you
That's,
say that
that's
was?
a Wednesday.
Is that all right with you?
Yes, ma'am. Wednesday, March 9 a.m.?
9 a.m.
If that works for the managers.
Yeah. And assuming the
Yes.
weather is decent. Okay. Now, did we give you enough feedback in order to construct the agenda for next time or regarding the rec center?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I do have a couple of questions, though. I'm thinking about an hour or so at each location. Is that sufficient, you think?
That's
Um,
probably longer than the managers would want us to be there.
Yeah.
And I just received a text message from Colin from the marina, and he was asking me, I didn't want you to think I was on my phone here, he was asking me if he could have some input on the times. I guess he's just got a lot going on and he doesn't want to miss it.
Yeah.
But,
And,
He could be first or last.
Or last.
okay, I'll coordinate with him just to,
yeah,
to make that work. And I had another question. I was given a heads up. Could I please ask the two gentlemen that spoke to come to the lectern and give your name and address, please, for the record? Because we have to, we have to do the meeting notes.
This is just a work session.
Now this, Arkansas law, we still have to do the meeting minutes.
Randy Rolfe, RAHLF,
And what's your address, sir?
24 Buckskin Lane.
24 Buckskin. Did you get that, Sharon?
Yes.
And sir,
Rick Chambers, 4 Quail Run Drive,
number 4,
number 4.
Quail Run. Okay. You got that, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay.
and Barb, tell, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara.
Barb
You,
South at 9 Horseshoe Drive.
I wrote me in there.
okay.
Okay. Suzanne, just getting ready for next Monday, then, are we asking Danny to come with an amount of money that we can cash fund, and then we're gonna make a motion to go forward in the process?
I think it would be helpful if we could establish the budget and then make a motion to hire an architect. And then maybe we can move forward.
I would like to share this with the board because I had told the chairperson this, but I wanted the rest of you to know. We went and looked at the pond rehab that we had discussed for the capital projects. We believe we can do that in-house. We have the equipment to do it. We have the manpower, the know-how. And so I met Dan and Kenny and Tyler over there about a week and a half ago. We looked at that. So that was $150,000 that we had set aside for that capital project that I think we can shift towards the recreation center. And then we had an additional $150,000 that we had budgeted for the recreation center.
Right.
So, and I will get you a more accurate number if necessary, but that's what we have set aside currently.
Well, I think we get the architect. Being my limited time in sales, nobody ever came in and said, I've got $65,000 to spend on that pickup truck. Now, how much do you want for it?
Isn't that the truth?
So if you go out and you say, okay, we got $300,000 to spend on this rec center, what do you think that price is going to be?
So you're saying we need to keep it in our vest?
Yes.
Wait a minute, that's not a secret. He'll ask, how much can we afford, period.
Yeah, well, you have to know.
It has no bearing on him.
Oh.
If he says he's gotta stay in a $150,000 budget, he'll draw a building that'll fit that. If we
That's
say
right.
we got 300,000, he can build that or draw that as well.
So Randy, you're saying we ought to say we have 200,000?
Yeah, I think
And
we
then we
ought
got enough money to cover the overages.
exactly, I think we ought to say what we can afford. Because we have 300,000, doesn't mean we need to spend 300,000.
That's right.
If we tell him we have a budget of 150,000 and he builds us or draws us something for that, and we have 50,000 in overruns or extras because of landscaping and fencing and lighting and security, so be it, because that's probably not gonna be on his drawing. But those are things that are probably gonna get spent.
Barbara?
A question I have is, are we considering the option of a metal building? I know Wolf Wellness, they built a beautiful facility, and of course, the therapy area is very nicely.
It is a metal building, what they
It's-
proposed. It's
it's
very,
a metal-
very similar
yeah.
to Wolf Fitness.
Right. Oh,
It's
wonderful.
a metal building with
Yeah.
some stone
This plan
and
is-
cedar
is
accents.
metal.
Dressed up.
Dressed
Yeah,
up.
dressed
yes.
up. Yeah, dressed
Yeah.
up.
Uh,
Ken?
Danny, we mentioned during budget time that we were 41%, I think it was 41.5% on our reserves, and the law says we should have at least 35.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to keep it where it is, but let's say it goes more than that. let's say we can't do this without paying more, and going back to the pickup truck and so forth, some of those CDs come due, well, they came due last month, January. And do you need a motion? Are we gonna, I guess what I'm saying is, are we gonna sign up for another 0.111% or something for 50,000? Or are we going to look at having the reserves at what the state says we have to have it? You know what I'm saying? There's money in there that we talked about when we were building the budget, and we left it at 41.5%, which is above 35, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's some money that could be there. If you didn't come up with this plan for our folks to do the pond 12 and 14. Now, by the way, they're gonna do 14 and get rid of all the scum and drain it and do the whole thing that the company from Dallas was going to do.
Now, Tyler believes that we are better off maybe to not dredge out the pond. Because sometimes when you dredge a pond, it will start to leak. If you don't have the right type of base in the bottom of that pond.
So you're talking about 14 now?
Yeah,
And,
yeah, on
on
14.
14.
14's the one we decided
or
not to
12,
do anything.
Or 12,
Either
either
12
either
and
one.
14.
12 is where the fence is leaning in, that's 12, with a fountain in the
Where the
middle,
stones are leaning in.
Oh, yeah.
over by Holiday Island Drive, okay? 14
I know
is
number
where-
12 very well, thank you.
I know, well, I'm just trying to
I
tell you.
fell in the whole damn thing.
I'm trying to tell you which one there is the problem. More problematic is the 14 with the scum all over it.
That's what you.
Oh, it's cleared now.
But that'll clear
Oh,
itself if they
Just
if they
need
can
water.
keep, if they can
Compliments
keep
of
the
the winter.
aeration going, that'll clear itself.
Winter and water.
Oh, and that reminded me of something, Madam Chair. I wanted to mention this also to the board. As he's mentioning the reserves, we are at 41%. And I want to, keep our eye on the ball on how we're tracking with our expenditures and revenue. I have the information that I need to prepare the financials for year end 2021. So I will have that for the board next Monday.
Good, good.
And,
But you're right, we are in really good shape in terms of reserves, and if we needed to dip into that a little bit.
It's only like 40,000 though. I mean, that dip wouldn't be very deep is what I'm saying.
Right.
It's not gonna generate $100,000 or anything.
Yeah.
So,
I
but
like money in the bank.
this is
Yeah,
a
I did
discussion period, we're not gonna vote on it, but what happens to the CDs that make that 6.5% above 35? Don't we need to either renew those or do something with them?
Ask them to
Something.
prepay them if you need the money.
I believe
Cash
there's
them in.
6 different CDs and they're just routinely rolled over to the next period, either
Oh.
6 months or a 1-year period.
They automatically renew?
No.
No,
No, we have
voted.
to, we have to sign paperwork for them to renew and we take care of that here. But the practice has been to put those out to different institutions to
Yeah.
get rates. And the only institution that offered us a rate and the opportunity to reinvest this last time was CS Bank. And so that's what we did.
And we have been doing consistently the shortest term,
Yeah, okay.
thinking that the rates were gonna improve, so.
Hopefully.
Well,
Because at one time, and
My
I'll finish with
RRAs are
this,
now-
Might
at
get
one
penalty,
time on rec
but you
center,
cash
we were
in.
going to have to take out a loan, short-term loan, and I would be against
No,
that. So if we have money available, that's good.
Okay, anything else for the cause? You have the information that you need to construct the next agenda?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. In that case,
When is that meeting?
that meeting is next Monday at 9 o'clock, February the 28th, Mr. Stamps.
Thank you.
Will we have the financials next Monday, by email?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will email them ahead of the meeting, and then I'll put them up here and kind of walk through those financials with you at the meeting
And that's from November,
for the
The end
the
of
year
year.
end,
end of the
end of year for 21.
And I want to say in open session, thank you, Cheryl, for sending us all of the documentation that we needed to review before this meeting. It was good to have that in time to look at all of it, kind of absorb it, so thank you for that.
Much appreciated, Chuck.
Yes, yes. All right, anything else? I don't guess we have to have a motion to adjourn, we just quit, don't we?
I do have one question for Danny. When are there's a couple of projects coming up with the city of Holiday Island that you told me about. When are we gonna discuss those? One is the culvert and one is the sheriff.
The sheriff.
department.
I was gonna say, Rich.
Okay. With the culverts, they have not passed that ordinance yet. And if the city passes that ordinance, then we would have a policy that, you know, dovetails with their ordinance.
Okay.
Meaning that we would install, our road department would install the culverts, and we would have some sort of mechanism for calculating that cost based on the size of the culvert and the man hours and equipment that it takes to put it in, and then we would bill the property owner that amount. Now,
Okay.
what we are currently doing is the builder installs the culvert.
Right.
And so the builder, contractor, and the property owner, they work that out, and they do it to Kenny's satisfaction as far as sizing the pipe.
Okay. Well, the sheriff, I'm a little confused as to where we are because we talked about it quite a bit. We've approved our contract for one deputy. As a city, we have to have an interlocal agreement to have the two.
There is a proposed three-way contract between HICID and the city and the county.
Okay.
Chairperson and I met with the mayor, we looked over that, it looked good. Then the county told us that if they hire an additional deputy, they're gonna have to have another vehicle to go along with that person. That vehicle's about $44,000 all in with it being outfitted. And so we have to go back and write that into the contract to purchase that vehicle up front. And then we have to develop a mechanism here at HICID to bank that money so that in 4 or 5 years, when that vehicle's due to be replaced, we have a fleet replacement fund that we can draw on to replace it.
It's that equipment reserve fund.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Okay.
takes,
So,
Well, I want to make sure, I know it's not on the agenda, but I think it's important that I would like, if we have two deputies and we're sharing in cost 50/50, that they're not both working 7 to 3 p.m. Can we make sure of that?
yes, sir.
You're an experienced police detective and sergeant and everything else and chief. I don't want them both on Holiday Island Drive stopping speeders. You know, and one of the reasons they brought up about needing a second deputy was fraud. You know, somebody was told to go to Dollar General and get a $500 and a lot of those kind of things. I'm not making light of that, but if we need people here for crime, for drugs, for other things, you know, and we don't need them both in the day shift, and maybe once in a while on a Saturday. Just want to throw that out.
And I don't know if I pointed this out, but the contract went back to the attorneys to put those provisions in there to fund that vehicle. So that's the current status of the contract.
And where's that money come from? Where's that 40,000 come from?
That's what he was just talking about. That's what he was just talking about,
The reserve?
the reserve to build up that money.
That's where that's gonna come from.
Yes, sir, there's money in there, but it's to cover all, you know, all of HICID.
You know. But maybe I'm being real deadheaded about this.
It's
but
not
is the
budgeted,
money,
if that's what you're asking.
is it in CDs or is it in cash in the bank? Where is the reserves? Where are the reserves for 44
in
grand?
both,
It is
actually.
both. Yeah, there's a money market account,
Okay,
which all revenue goes to the money market account.
okay,
That money market account has more money in there than is needed
okay,
by not a huge margin.
yeah, okay,
And then most of the reserves are in CDs.
okay, got it.
You could have him on a bicycle.
That, you better find a healthy young man for that.
He's back.
Now, my understanding also was that the
Fit deputy.
sheriff's department will own the vehicle.
Correct.
So they will be responsible for maintenance and tires, oil changes.
That was a point of discussion that the
And
mayor
that's
and
what
I
that was what I was wondering
with the
about.
sheriff, and that's also a part of the deliberations going on with the attorneys about, well, you've got fuel, and as you said, tires, and, you know,
Insurance.
just general
Yeah.
maintenance,
So,
insurance.
Theoretically, those cars would stay in their motor pool.
Correct. Yes, and the county would hold the title and the insurance.
Okay,
That's what you're
all right.
Yes.
We done now?
Almost.